watching Veracity Hill. Here is your host, Dr. J.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here for another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on what is a skeptic. And this is episode 202. Very excited to be back with you here yet again. We are streaming from the office of Defenders Media in downtown West Chicago, Illinois. And it's a great opportunity, a blessing to have this workspace, to be coming to you today and talking about an interesting subject. Last week we looked at what is a Christian, and I gave this working definition. And there have been some YouTubers who have been commenting and maybe pushing back a little on my definition, but I've held fast, and I'd welcome, if you haven't watched that yet, go ahead, head to our YouTube channel, Veracity Hill, and watch that episode. And if you're not a subscriber yet, smash that subscribe button. We'd love to have you follow along with the material that we're creating here at Veracity Hill. Hope that it's edifying to you. You're growing in your faith, or perhaps growing in your understanding. If you're not a person of faith, would certainly invite you to give that consideration and reflection. And we're looking at the concept today of skepticism. And I wanted to, first, before we jump into our discussion with our guest today, I wanted to provide a working definition. But before I get into that, I do want to say, as a reminder, well, as a reminder from one of the workers here at Defenders, I forgot to mention him last week, and he's been a good friend of mine, in many ways a best friend for many years, Mark Lester. He's been working here at Defenders. He's had this nifty idea about asking ChatGPT to explain high-level concepts for, say, a high school level. So we've got this video we're going to play here. It's just 50 seconds, and this is ChatGPT's take on skepticism. So let's go ahead and listen in to Mark as he asks ChatGPT about skepticism.
Explain to me what a skeptic is, as if I were a high schooler. Sure, imagine you have a friend who questions everything, even things that seem certain or obvious. That friend is a bit like a skeptic. A skeptic is someone who doesn't just accept information or believes without thinking about them first. They want evidence or good reasons to believe something is true before they accept it. Skeptics often ask questions like, how do we know this is true? Or can we trust the source of this information? They're like the detectives of the belief world, always investigating to make sure what they're told or what they believe is actually backed up by good reasons.
All right, so that's ChatGPT, and what's really interesting about this, I really like this statement here. Skeptics, they are the detectives of the belief world, always investigating to make sure what they're told or what they believe is actually backed up by good reasons. And I read that, and I think of that, and I think, gosh, I'm a skeptic by this understanding. Although I don't self-identify as a skeptic, but really functionally, I can be very skeptical. But yet I still find myself coming down on a certain position. And but that's not always the way it is for everyone. People come down on different positions, or they remain sort of uncertain, and so they might be an agnostic. And so we've got someone on our program today who identifies as the Faithiest Atheist, and his name is Richard Suttles. And let me tell you a little bit about Richard, my friend. So I'll read this bio since it's highly technical with his career accolades here. And many of you may not know this about Richard. You might know him from his various Facebook reflections, and also his very kind personality. He's very civil, cordial, courteous. He's provocative in a nice sense, and it's very nice to know him. And I know him personally. We've had meals together and conversations. So Richard Suttles currently serves as a senior intelligence analyst and liaison with the U.S. federal government. For the past 29 years, he really doesn't look that old, but for the past 29 years, he's worked in many realms of the intelligence community. with the Department of Defense, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security. From 1995, I was 8 years old at the time, from 1995 to 2005, he served in the United States Marine Corps, including tours in Haiti and Iraq. He has 2 postgrad degrees from the University of Oklahoma, one in communications and the other in international relations. He also completed a counterterrorism training program at the Naval Postgraduate School. But here's where things get interesting. Richard has a special focus in the radicalization process that some people go through when they become committed to conducting violence in the interest of furthering ideological goals. He also studies the intricacies of persuasion campaigns. These are methodologies from organizations and social media algorithms that can prompt people to become fervent supporters of goals chosen by the campaign. So this is really what he's used to help build his own following. He's benefited from these strategies. Of course, I jest. But Richard, welcome to the program. Very glad to have you today. And I assume all is good with the tech. This is the first time we've had a guest since the relaunch. Gabe, my tech guy, might say, hey, we're good to go.
Okay.
Okay, good. I can hear you. So we should be good. Richard, good to see you. Thanks for joining me to discuss what is a skeptic. And why don't you basically start us off by telling the internet world that how we know each other. How did we meet?
Okay, yeah, sure. I forget if it was a year ago or 2 years ago, but we met at, I think we've been to 2 apologetics conferences. It could have been 2 at the same city at the same time, but we went to an apologetics conference where you were one of the speakers, and I was there as a guest of Eric Hernandez, who's another speaker and was in charge of that conference. And then I think you and I went to another one that had Paul Capan and William Lane Craig.
In Houston.
Right, yes. And that's where we started just hanging out and talking. And then we just stayed in touch ever since then. And in fact, we even had we had a really great conversation. I think in that second apologetics conference. So we might have had like an hour or 2 just to sit and talk about what I believed, and you could kick the tires a little bit on what I thought.
Yeah, I remember. Let's see, at the Texas one, I remember we talked, I think, about minimal facts. But yeah. I do remember we were at the second one when we were sitting on couches outside of a breakout room, and. Yeah. Yes, we had an interesting convo, and this is where, some of our mutual friends have maybe seen me make some comments on Facebook and social media. So you self-identify as the Faithiest Atheist, but I think I've got you pinned in a playful yet loving way as a Freest Deist. And
deist instead of an atheist.
That's right, because I think you shared with me something like, statistically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you may have said something like, you think it's probable that there is some creator of the universe.
Or something. I think what I said was that there could be something. Is it going to be a mind in the way that a lot of religious people think of a deity, or just something? Could it be aliens at a cosmic university, and we're just like their test rats or something?
Yeah, kind of like Men in Black, right? At the very end of Men in Black, you kind of zoom out, and it's like these bugs playing with our universe, right? Our galaxy, right?
Right. And actually, that would make a lot of sense to me. If we were to find out that was what was going on, I would say, like, man, that explains a bunch of stuff now.
But that just pushes the issue further, right? About what created those things.
Right, and then in that case, it's out of my hands at that point. But at least it would explain what I'm seeing.
Right. But we would want to worship the creator of them, if
right.
Unless you get into an infinite regress.
Well, and then that creator might not want us to worship him. What if he created the bugs to mess with us so that we don't worship him? Who knows?
Oh yes, Descartes' evil demon, Rene Descartes. That's kind of, but he finds his way out of that, I think. But okay. So yes, Freest Deist. We'll see if at the end of our discussion, if maybe I might be able to get you to change your Facebook name. I'm skeptical myself. Look at that. I'm skeptical.
Skeptic.
Yes, myself. So bringing it back to our conversation here, what is a skeptic? Yeah. So while you self-identify as atheist or maybe agnostic, certainly I'm willing to say you are a skeptic. We had this answer from ChatGPT give us basically the understanding of a skeptic, for a high school student. And by that understanding, I would be a skeptic because it's someone who continues to ask provoking questions and wonders, they're the detectives of the belief world. And that's definitely you. That's also me, oddly enough.
Right.
We're both detectives. We both want to pursue the truth. We want to understand, what is true of the world, and yet we come at these from different perspectives. Why don't you start us off a little bit about your journey, your history, and how did you get to where you are today as the Faithiest Atheist? And even, what do you mean, Faithiest? Having faith in atheism, what is that about?
Right. Okay. So I guess I'll start with Faithiest Atheist first. I was, I was raised Christian, and then I became an atheist, or at least a non-Christian, in my low 20s, and now I'm in my early 50s. So I know you say I don't look it, and thank you for saying that. But yeah, so for 30 years I've been a non-Christian, but I started off as the usual kind of atheist, which is, I used to believe that, and then I got smart, and then I learned about facts, and I used to be like that. But I very quickly realized, especially in my work, because I've been working in counterterrorism and studying neurology and how people can get radicalized, and I started to realize pretty quickly that we're all human beings have some things that they think are sacred. And then those sacred things really get into your mind, and you don't want to question those things. So, for an atheist or an anti-theist, it could be that religion is poison, or that religion is a mind virus. And that will be as sacred to them. I use the word sacred, but they'll treat it exactly the same way, is that it's so precious that it can't be touched, it can't be questioned. You must act on it, or you'll be in trouble. So I realized we're all kind of like that. And then we're also all skeptics. It's like you said before, we're all skeptics about something. So someone who is a very fervent flat earth believer might be skeptic, even if you took them up in a spaceship. They might say, okay, I felt the sensation of coming up into the atmosphere, but am I sure that that's what happened? They still might be conducting tests as they're floating over the earth and looking at a globe. So we're all skeptics, and we're all, some people say we're all religious. We all have, I would say, intellectual and moral standards that we think are precious or sacred, inviolable, if that's how you pronounce that word. Things that you just can't question because they're too special. And not only that, in some cases you'll say, I'm going to dedicate myself to the well-being of this concept. This concept needs to endure more than I need to endure. So if I die, but my concept endures, then I've lived a good life. Maybe it's irrational for me to die, but if it's in defense of this inviolable idea or concept, then it's okay, because that means something to me. We're all have the tendency to go that way. I know people who say, leave me alone, I don't think like that, just let me take care of my job. A lot of people are like that too. But I think once you get into this worldview game that you and I are in, I think at some point something is sacred to you, and then you're skeptical about things that go against that. So because I realized that we're all like that, I said, if I do an atheist page, it's not going to be the schooling atheist, or the defeating, the king atheist. It's going to be something like the weak atheist, or the maybe atheist. And then I was having a conversation. Someone said, you're pretty faithy for an atheist, and it was because I agree that I don't know where the universe came from. I just assumed that it came to be somehow, and that a mind didn't make it happen. And how did life happen? Well, it just happened somehow, and a mind didn't make it happen. And consciousness and recognizing beauty and all that. And they're like, that's pretty faithy. And I'm like, I'm the Faithiest, And then I was like, that rhymes with atheist. And then later I found out that somebody else had written a book called Faithiest, where he was like an atheist, but he said you have to get along with religious people. So if he ever writes me and says, hey, I came up with that first, then I'll back out and call myself something else. But that's how the name came up.
Now, when you've looked at the radicalization process and how people have these, sort of non-negotiable beliefs, that's not always a bad thing, right? I mean, suppose...
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. Suppose that we, believe something that was true of the world, and that was our proposition that we held on to.
Right.
So it's not always a bad thing, even if we can understand how belief works. It's not.
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is you're not trying to, take apart or dismantle the belief and therefore reject it. You're still just studying how it happens.
Right, exactly. In fact, so even though I've been doing Faithiest Atheist now for 4 or 5 years, I've been speaking in public on counterterrorism now for 30 years. And sometimes one of the first questions I get is how does someone become a terrorist? And I say two things happen. And the funny thing is, I would highly recommend the first step to the audience. I'm like, you might say, I don't want to be a terrorist. And I would say, great. And they'll say, so tell me the two steps and I'll stay away from them. And I'll say, actually, do the first step. I highly recommend it. And the first step is that you find something that's really, really important to you, and it means something, and it changes your life. Because chances are you're going to get up a little bit earlier in the morning. You're going to take better care of yourself. You're going to start listening to other people because you want to represent this idea that sort of transformed you. And I'm like, that's actually a great idea. Now, when ISIS does that, I'm like, maybe find something else. So I don't think that finding something sacred by itself is horrible or great. But if it's something good and helpful, and it's not harming you and it's not harming the world, then I would say go for it. And I don't mean that like in a postmodernist way. I mean, it's really got to be helpful to you, and something that seems to be fulfilling. So yeah, I say go through that first step, and then it's the second step that I would say don't do. And that second step, I don't know why the balloons came up. Maybe because I did the peace sign.
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you I think you've got a Mac, maybe.
Yeah, I do.
And you've updated the operating system, so certain signals. Richard, just so everyone can see, can you throw up like and watch what happens. You got to do the thumbs, I think, actually.
Okay.
Connect the thumbs.
Okay.
Yes, there we go. Laser show.
What? Yes. Was that the power of Satan?
Awesome.
So yeah, it's that second step, which is hating people who don't agree with your thing. So obviously what happens is if you find something that's sacred to you and meaningful and you bond with other people, man, you walk into a bar and somebody else agrees with that's a stranger, you guys might start talking that day. And you might start texting and being boys for life just because you agree on it. So it's like a bonding mechanism. Right. But another thing that happens is that you like it so much, you meet somebody that's bonded the other way, and you're suspicious of them, and you're like, well, they're morally declined or they're intellectually inferior. That's all very human, by the way. That's not something that religious or atheist people have a lock on. If you're a human being, you tend to think that, and so I would say just don't start hating people that don't agree with your thing. You can talk to them about it, be intrigued by it, but don't automatically dehumanize them. That's where terrorists go wrong, because once they think entire populations aren't really human, then they see terrorist events as cleaning. They're like, I didn't kill any people. I'm cleaning viruses and I'm cleaning germs off of the planet for the real people, which is why they're not like bank robbers, because bank robbers know it's wrong and they're trying to stay underneath the radar. Terrorists want you to know. They're like, yeah, I did that because I'm doing something. I see a higher truth that you guys don't see. So there's a righteousness. There's a sense. I say righteousness. In their view, there's a righteousness there that bank robbers don't have.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who is skeptical, again, using the definition, I'm also skeptical. So for someone like you, that step 2 is a bad thing, right? And isn't that I know you and I haven't really gotten into discussions, I think, on moral values. Maybe we have through text message. I can't remember.
Right.
But so what sort of guides you? Why would you say that is a bad thing, and where are you getting that value sense from? Have you given thought to exploring an ethical framework as an atheist?
You mean, why do I think it happens to humans? Why do they go through that stage? What were they?
No, not why do they go through that stage, but why should we even say that that's a bad thing when someone becomes a terrorist?
Right. Well, in my view, and of course, I think that natural forces are behind all this, even though it's mysterious and inspirational. I just think that there's biological conditions that can make you selfish sometimes, but it can also make you community oriented sometimes. I think there's a lot. Some of these books behind me are about how that can happen, and so I think here's what I think. Most of all, I think we all kind of start off selfish, and it could be sort of like a caterpillar and a butterfly. Human beings kind of start off thinking about me, and then the world kind of slaps you down and knocks you around, and then you get older and you're like, man, I need to start thinking about this from the other people's perspective too. And then society, then you start warming up and interacting with society, and it's sort of an enlightening metamorphosis right there. So I think that kind of thinking isn't necessarily from God. To think about other people, it could just be a biological thing. It's the same as the ants. An ant doesn't think about himself for a minute. When somebody attacks the ant bed, he stops what he's doing. He goes back, goes straight towards the 200-pound person stomping on the ant bed and dies. But the fact that there's tens of millions of them all doing that is the reason why ants are still here. Is because they're sort of automatons for the colony rather than thinking rationally for their individual selves.
So you would say that morals, or at least a guiding principle for you then, is sort of biological necessity, or like, social values that have evolved over time due to biological factors. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, I would say if humans have been around for 300,000 years, and even this even happens with primates before them, that there was some degree of chemistry that goes into a struggle between, am I going to take care of just me, or am I going to take some time out of my day and some energy out of my day to focus on other people? So, same as like parents do with their kids. It's just that with primates, a lot of primates, they've extended it from their family to like maybe members of a tribe, and humans have extended that to just people. If you're just a person on the earth,
yeah,
I can feel some sort of binding to you. Is that because God did it, or just because we're just an extra step further as primates? That's a good question.
Well, let me, if I can, let me keep playing the role of a detective, right? As skeptical as a detective of the belief world. So if
Right.
a lot of the moral values that we have are just from our brain chemistry, for example, biological chemistry. What if we continued to evolve? And what if, due to, say, the development of natural resources or even the lack thereof, dictates that we have to start killing people off for the betterment of the species?
Yes.
Would that then become a moral good in your framework?
It wouldn't be to me, but I'm going to try to answer this on behalf of the species. The way I see it, because I've been studying this now for a long, long time, and what I think develops inside of us is like a well. I don't know if you ever saw Little House on the Prairie. You ever see Little House on the Prairie, the TV show?
I mean, I probably saw an episode here or there in my lifetime. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to use an analogy from there, but so like I don't think we're born with a set of moral norms. I think we're born with a well, and like our biology will say, the stuff in this well, it means everything. Just trust me, it means everything. And at the time, we're like, there's nothing in the well, or if there is, it's like love your mom and something like that. Maybe some of that, but nothing about Christianity or atheism. Just there's just a well, and that stuff gets programmed. The content gets programmed into that well throughout your life, but it's programmable. So you could be in situations like we are right now, where we kind of have everything we need, and we can argue with each other about who's the best person, and then things go south, and suddenly you got to be a warrior. I think humans can snap into it, and then the humans who don't go crazy will tell themselves, "Hey, I had to do what I had to do," and I was in the Marines, so I was very diplomatic in the Marines, and I tried to consider all sides, and I could even feel sorry for people, in Iraq who were coming to kill us. I could feel sorry that in some cases they really were kids, and people came and grabbed the kids and said, "Hey, we're making you do this." So I could feel sorry for them, but at the same time, I would say the guy next to me and the guy over here are not going to die, and I have the means to make sure they're not going to die. And so, we all had to take care of things like that. And I didn't go crazy over it, because I think humans can say, look, these are different situations, and we have to adapt. Again, I don't think that's subjectivism. I just think your circumstances have changed, and then you have a new guiding force. And if you can't do that, here's the thing I want to really say. If you're a human being who can't switch back and forth between warrior and diplomat and whatever's in between, and kind of do it on a dime, then you might not make it. The next big shift in weirdness, you might die out. And then, somebody down the street takes over, and, they end up having the family that you're going to have.
Yeah.
Again, if I'm right, natural selection's in charge, and natural selection does not love Kurt. He doesn't love Kurt. He's like, whoever's here is whoever's here.
Right. But it just is. So, I mean, what you've sort of described is yes, in a sense, it's the natural forces at work in, survival of the species. But that isn't to say that there's, a good or a bad, rather just kind of it is. Is that
right? Yeah, right. It is. However, we carry a perception of good or bad. So like I would do better if I just don't even think about this. If I just say I love my family, I'm a peaceful man, then we go to war and I'm like I'm a killer. Where's the enemy? And this is good. And if you were to sit me down and say, a year ago you were much different than you are now, maybe I would just punch you in the face and march off. It's probably better that we don't think about it. But our perception of good will change. And for us, it's not like if you tell somebody, hey, biology just made you a different person, they're going to get mad. They're going to be like, no, I rationally walked my way through this. That's just human nature. But I think it probably is that way. I think there's a lot of illusory stuff going on, and we fool ourselves about it, and then we deny it. And if we're really smart, we deny it very, very scholarly. But it's probably still true.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us, we all have biases, or as my friend Mike says, horizons, and so
yeah, I know. I've heard Mike Licona talk about horizons.
Yeah. So we all have them, and we all do try to justify our own behavior. We want to, at least in our own minds, think what we are doing is right.
Right.
But if we, there's a term that we use when people can't admit that they're wrong, or even if they're even possibly wrong, right? It's pride, right? Pride.
Right.
And so we view that as a bad thing. We still do value as a species the ability to realize our errors. So that's a social good, right?
Yeah, I think it can be. It could be damaging if you're in those situations where you have to act quick and defend your tribe, and there's people in the tribe who are thinking about it and saying, well, I want to rationally think through things. Those might be the first people to die. And in fact, that might be why we're this way. It could be that the survivors back in the past weren't the ones who sat underneath a tree and said, I'm going to do a Bayesian checklist before I act. Those people, they got killed first. And so that could be why we're so quick to jump and just say, this is the right way, and then go and then just stick with it.
So those performing the Bayesian formulas in the 21st century, they are people of luxury, is what you're saying.
Right. We're in conditions now where you can do your Bayesian checklist and have at it. But I think there's times where it won't help you. You got to act quick. And I don't say that you should prepare for that. I'm just saying it could happen. And if you're not prepared for that, then you won't get to enjoy conversations about it later.
Yeah. And for those who are wondering what Bayesian formulas or calculations are, Bayesian probability theory is a more complex version of thinking probabilistically, where essentially you factor in background knowledge, and that helps you to build a better understanding. Let me give a quick example. I enjoy giving this example because it hits on the classic genetic fallacy. People say, well, hey, if you were born in China, you'd most likely be an atheist, right? You wouldn't be a Christian. You're only a Christian because you're born in 20th century America. Well, interestingly enough, that doesn't even hold much weight any longer. But, so if you were born in China, you'd be an atheist. Well, but what if there was a new piece of information that I was born to Christian missionaries in China? Well, now all of a sudden the probability of what my beliefs would be it totally switched on the spectrum, right? I'd very likely be a Christian. So you see how that one little piece of information can swing the whole probability theory. So you just go from a generic basic probability formula to something a little more complex. But sometimes these Bayesian calculations can get really complicated, as likely Richard knows, because what you ascribe to the priors could be a whole host of factors, variables. It's a formula unto itself. Okay, but getting off the trail, but that's basically Bayesian probability theory. And as Richard said, back in the day, a long, long time ago, if you sat down figuring these things out, you were likely the one to get killed from the invading tribe.
Right.
So, okay, well, let's pull it back a little from our discussion on morality and your views back to skepticism. So, for you, have you always found yourself as a skeptical thinker? Was this the result of maybe your upbringing? My dad has sort of an engineering mind, and so I sort of inherit it from him.
I see. Okay.
So, what? Take me to your personal life. What sort of brought you to thinking this way and wanting to pursue even studying the radicalization process?
Well, that's two different things. I kind of stumbled into the radicalization process just because, I was in the Marines and they put me in a job that started me down that road, and then I just tried to get good at it. Um, in terms of being skeptical, trying to be a cautious thinker, and then, um, let me go with that first. In terms of just being a skeptical thinker, it wasn't that I was raised to be skeptical or cautious. I think what happened was I just got beaten down by the world time and time again. I would say, this is true. This is how things are. Follow me. And then I would hit a wall. And then I would say, okay, this is how things are, and go this way, and I hit a wall. And after a while, I got tired of hitting walls. And then I'm like, okay, before I start, lunging towards walls, let me think a little bit. So it was more like lessons learned than being raised to do it. More like beaten down by the world, cornered. I often say I'm cornered into doing the right thing.
So just learning from experience, then,
right?
As it
trial
were.
and error. Yeah.
I take that to mean that you're a trusting person. I've had some life circumstances myself where I was a bit too trusting, and I learned the hard way. And sometimes that's just the way we learn.
Yeah, and I think for radicalization, what happened there was that I was studying how bad guys, fall in love with ideas and then start to hate people. And then everything that they talk about is in defense of their ideas and how they demonize other people. And then I noticed that politicians did that. And then I noticed that my neighbors did that. And then I noticed that people at the grocery store did that. And I'm like, holy mackerel, this isn't terrorism, this is humanity. And terrorism is just like a realm where it gets so bad that you commit yourself to killing people. And so I said, because this is all humans, that's sort of a wake-up call for me. And then when I heard atheists and Christians yelling at each other, like I remember Cameron Bertuzzi, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, would be on Facebook, defending Christianity, and the atheists will be screaming and the Christians will be screaming. And I would be like, hey guys, we have a lot more in common than you realize. And they would all be like, shut up. You're not on any side. You're just saying that we're all weird. So yeah, that was kind of inspiring for me. I was like, I think this is a message that I could probably run with, is that this is more human than it is Christian or atheist.
So through your skepticism, through the learning of life experiences, I mean, you've come to conclusions, about what humans are like. You've realized, hey, this is the way we act. And so in a sense, you've got these, at least with regard to some beliefs about the world and humanity, right. You do have these beliefs about what we're like.
And I have faith in them.
That you are the Faithiest Atheist.
Faithiest something.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out, the faith. There's a faith in humanity, and it is nice that you show generosity and charitability to people, and I certainly applaud you and thank you for that. The world needs more of that for sure.
Thank you.
I would love to have you come around, and think more deeply about, as well, that you see the goodness in human nature, and I think that's a reflection of the Creator God. It's not just because we're the result of space dust rearranging itself.
Right.
There's more to humanity here, and it's something beautiful and good and true even. So we've had a few comments from folks here. Okay. The Great Deconstruction. Don't know who you are, but I hope you are deconstructing and rebuilding. He says that Faithiest Deist would be fighting words. I hope you don't mind that I've, playfully and lovingly called you, a Faithiest Deist.
No, I remember our conversation. As soon as I was talking about, how, I think what I said was, and I'll make it quick because we'll get into this later, but I think I said that if I was, the 50-yard line is there's something, and the other side of the 50-yard line is there's nothing, and I'm standing on the line, and like an alien pulls a gun on me and says, choose right now, choose. And I'd be like, okay, maybe before I even think about it, I'd probably fall over on the side that there's got to be something. And you said, okay, that's not even agnostic, that's deism. And so from then on, you're like, I'll find something that rhymes and I'll make it work. And the thing is I don't know if that's really an intellectual movement on my, an intellectual take, or if is it just an emotional, I don't know. But I certainly understand. Because of that, I understand when people say there's got to be something. I can understand that.
Yeah. I mean, surely you could think that there are a lot of rational arguments out there, from cosmology,
fine-tuning.
You've heard it all, right? We don't have to go through it. Fine-tuning, for example. So
Absolutely.
when you say maybe it's an emotional thing, I mean, couldn't we simply credit that you think those arguments have even a little or some weight to them?
Yeah, I would say like existence itself and fine tuning are inspiring. So maybe the emotion comes from that, but it could be wrong. And so my real caution is to say I can see why you would think that there's something, but I'm really cautious if you say, okay, now this is what the something wants you to know, and this is what the something wants you to say. Then I get really skeptical. That's where my skepticism comes in.
Well, so the conclusions of those various arguments for the existence of God is that we can know something about the something, that it would be outside of space and time, for example, immensely powerful, immaterial, right? So the material world wouldn't come from a material thing. If we're talking about the beginning of matter itself, that can't come from matter because then matter doesn't have that beginning, at least at that moment, right? So we can learn something about the something. Is that fair?
Yeah, and those things for me, that's still fairly not generic, but I don't necessarily have to say Jesus yet. I can say, okay, yeah, something powerful, amazing outside of our cosmos.
Yeah,
got it. Now maybe completely uninterested in us. Maybe he forgot he did it. Maybe he hates us. Maybe it's a bunch of people messing with us. Who knows? But certainly powerful and outside of space and time, if that's how it is.
right. Yeah, I mean, when you say, maybe it's people, I mean, so even then you're granting agency in some respect.
Right. I would say, yeah, if there's something that created all this and all the fine tuning, it sure seems like agency is a reasonable follow up from that. If it's
Yeah, what you've just described of the possibilities of the something or some things. I mean,
yeah.
I
get it.
I'm glad to hear you say that. It doesn't really seem like the thing an atheist would say.
Well, here's something. I think this is another reason why I'm in this business is because I know too many atheists and too many apologists who say, I'm making a list. Tell me everything that they say, put it in here, and I'm going to put a big X over it. And then I'm going to defend why I put the X over it. Okay, but why did you put an X over it? Well, it's because they said it. So that's why the X goes. But
Yeah.
think about it first. No, X because they say it. And I think apologists and atheists do that. So I try to, if I'm in a group full of atheists and apologists and the atheists are screaming about Stephen Meyer and saying he needs to get with science, I'll probably say, you know what, yeah, Stephen Meyer knows a lot about science. So I wouldn't go after Stephen Meyer in terms of science. I try to not be like that. I try not to attack things just because the Christians say it or defend it just because the atheists say it.
Yeah, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. You want to hear what people have to say. We might be able to learn something from folks outside of our own tribes, our ideological tribes, if you will.
Yeah, and also separate the information from the people and separate the information from the tribe and the label. So someone that you hate, there's an ISIS terrorist and he speaks for an hour, but out of that hour, let's say he says 3 things and I'm like, that's actually a good point. I'll never join ISIS, but I can separate the information from the speaker. I think that's part of skepticism too. Is you're judging the information, you're not necessarily judging the person.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We don't want to, as the classic ad hominem fallacy. You don't shoot the messenger. You want to attack the argument, or as you say, the information, and evaluate it. Yeah. Good. Richard, we've got to take a short break here, a break from our sponsors. When we come back, I've got some screenshots. I know my middle name or nickname with you now is Kurt Screenshot Jarris. In preparation for our convo today, I've noticed a few things I wanted to pick your brain about. So we'll put your feet to the fire over things you've said after this break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill with Dr. Kurt Jarris.
Hi, I'm YouTube.
And I'm Apologetics 315.
Oh, that's nice. What do you do again?
I'm a video hosting platform for Christian apologists.
Oh, you're Christians who apologize for being offensive.
No, that's not what that means.
Oh, I don't like your tone.
My tone?
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 sec. Sorry. There. That'll help you not sound so offensive.
Apologetics315.com. Your home for Christian apologetics videos and community.
No one told us we could actually stand on stools. So unfair.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
You're listening to Veracity Hill with Dr. Kurt Jarris.
Welcome back to episode 202, What is a Skeptic? And on today's program, I've been joined by my friend, the Faithiest Atheist, Richard, as we've been talking about a number of different subjects. We've been just having a nice conversation. I've gotten to know Richard a little bit more. We've had conversations in the past. We've shared meals together, and he is a friend of mine, and he's a very kind and generous person. He's charitable. I really appreciate that charitability. As some of you may know from the work of Veracity Hill, I've pursued charitability myself through conversations with Apologia, through defending Bart Ehrman on some things. That got me some flack from some Christian apologists. But, you know, so that series, for those that may be interested, that series is called Misquoting Ehrman. There's a playlist at my YouTube channel. You can watch that. I think it's really unfair when Christian apologists, people who are supposed to be defending the truth, say false things about what Bart Ehrman said. And so, you know, I thought there was a corrective needed there. I do want to thank the Great Deconstruction, who's been following our episode today. Thanks for watching along. He said, I saw during the commercial break, he didn't realize this is actually live. Yes, it is. And thank you, the Great Deconstruction, for subscribing to Veracity Hill. And every week now, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, we'll be coming at you with a lot of good content and some fun stuff happening next week, but I won't announce that yet. Now, on this segment of the program today, I've kept Richard on because I want to pick his brain about screenshots. And so I'm going to share the screen so he can see what I've got prepared for him. Let's see here if I can get this. It's going to be a window. Oh, maybe it has to be. It's not a Chrome tab. I've got.
This is good practice for Judgment Day.
Okay, let me see if I can share the whole screen. One moment, Richard. Here. We're going to give you an infinite loop here. Let's see.
Also good practice for going to hell.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Being stuck in an infinite loop.
Okay, can you see the screenshot there, Richard?
I can't read it just because I'm old.
Oh.
Are you going to read it anyway?
I'll read it out loud for you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll trust you. You can say anything. I'll believe that you said it. I'll believe that I said it.
That's too trusting. You'll learn from experience then. Okay, I want to be selective about what I'm starting with here, though. Okay, so you are a reflective person, Richard, and I've appreciated that. So sometimes I think you've kind of shared what's on your mind and your analysis, and so I want to, maybe push back a little bit on some of these ideas. And full transparency, some of these are from like weeks ago, so I'm going to be, I've forgotten what some of these are, but I had a little folder. Okay,
awesome.
So I don't remember when these were, but these are in fact you writing these things.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So we're going to, let's see. I think Gabe and I decided we're going to call this segment, What Did He Say? to use that classic meme or video. Maybe Gabe in some of the clips will add that audio here. Okay, so what did he say? The Faithiest Atheist. Here we go, Richard. Let's say the arguments for Jesus' resurrection were overwhelmingly compelling. In fact, let's say all the atheist historians grudgingly concede that a resurrection is the only possible explanation given the historical record. Even with all that, believing in the resurrection is still not a great way for people of the world to become Christians. If God created us, then he knows us and how we are extremely vulnerable to embracing our cultural norms and moral standards based on where and when we grew up. So, those of us in dominant Christian areas are extremely fortunate to have access to all this resurrection evidence. We are inundated with it. Plus, we're often encouraged, even pressured, to embrace it. If Christianity is true and if God wants us all to accept the gospel message, I feel terrible for the billions of people who don't have the luxury of what we have. They were literally born into an environment that statistically guarantees the resurrection evidence won't be enough for them. Again, assuming God is real and wants us all to believe this, I can't tell if we're lucky or if those are unlucky. And I'm especially concerned with whether God would let things be like this. It means the well-being of our eternal souls is mostly tied to our circumstances rather than how we think or the decisions we make. It doesn't seem God-like. It seems way more people-like. Okay, so that was one of your thoughts. Do you have an inkling, a memory of writing something like this?
Yeah, I do remember writing that. It wasn't too long ago. I think it was pretty soon after Easter because we were all talking resurrection stuff. And so that was kind of my wrapping up Easter post.
Yeah. And I know I've had this full screen, so the audience has probably lost you here. But maybe we've got you there a little bit. So we'll stop.
You can fix it in editing.
That's true. I could. Yes. Okay. So yeah, let me push back on this if I can. I sort of have two lines I want to go. The first is you say it doesn't seem godlike. So what do you mean there? Wouldn't we be imposing our own ideas about what God should do?
Yes.
And yet all we are is humans, and we just have our finite limitations of knowledge and moral values. So how can we say it's not godlike? So that's the first route I want to take.
Okay. Should I do that one first? Should I answer that one first?
Yeah, go ahead.
My take is this. Every human being who considers the possibility of God does exactly what you just said. They say, okay, if I was God, this is what I would do. And so, I mean, every time I hear a Christian talk, they'll say, God has done all these wondrous things. He did this so that we could understand this. He understood this rule was important, so he gave it to us. And I'm like, you're doing the same thing I'm doing. It's just nobody's catching it because they agree with you. They're like, oh, yeah, that isn't what God would do. And I'm kind of biased on this because I spend time watching ISIS. And, ISIS is only 10 years old, and I've been doing this for 30. So, I started back when I was starting this, there was even groups before Al-Qaeda that would talk, like, let's kill everybody. But they say God wants them to do it. And they're like, what part of God's mandate is so confusing to people that they don't understand what God wants? They're bringing their worldly needs and their worldly wants into this rather than just reading what, God is, read the instruction book. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think. What does the cookbook say? If you want muffins, follow the cookbook. So I've always been suspicious of that type of language because they're doing the same thing. They've picked the verses that fit in with their tribal, they're thinking we're the ones and they're all wrong and we're going to teach them and God's going to be happy with us. They're actually showing off for God. They're not hiding from God when they do that. So I'm like, we all do this. If you believe in God, you are doing it. And if you're mad at someone else for worshiping God the wrong way, then you step up on God's behalf. And if you don't believe in God, then you say, I would do this. In fact, I would say all the millions of people, okay, not all, a lot of the Christians that I know that have deconstructed, it wasn't because they wanted to join the Democrat Party or be a postmodernist. But a lot of them read some verses and they were like, hold on, I've been listening about Jesus my whole life. I cannot see why this verse would match something that he would say. This seems like a person who wrote this. And so I'm going to walk away from those verses. And that was more of their deconstruction, more than, inventing a new Jesus. So I say we all do that. And that's my take. My take is that if he does want us to have a certain message that he wants all 8 billion to understand, then the resurrection and spreading the news of the resurrection over the course of 2,000 years is not the way to go. That's my take.
So aren't you acting in terms of the frame of mind? Aren't you acting the same way as the ISIS person who says, God wants me to do this,
Yes.
and you're
Yes.
saying no, that's not godlike. So
Yes.
you're acting the same way, right?
Yeah, and that was my thing. We all do it. If you're religious, you do it. If you're not religious, all you got to do is consider the concept of God, and then you put yourself into the God mind and say, okay, what would I do? So yeah, I'm doing it just like ISIS, but I'm doing it better. So like if aliens are watching us, they'll be like, you know what? They all do what they think God wants, but look at Richard. He's kicking butt, and ISIS is saying some weird stuff. Wow, Richard's awesome. In my mind, the aliens love me. In your mind, Jesus loves you. In my mind, these aliens at the Cosmic University love me.
I just have a hard time when folks think that they know better than God, or even the fictional God.
Right.
I mean, because it's not quite humble of us to say that we know what to do better than God. And so let me give some concrete examples.
Okay.
While we can speak abstractly, I've had discussions on divine hiddenness about, what God would do in certain circumstances. But let's take a more concrete example, say the Levitican laws. A lot of people in the 21st century laugh at what God instructed, or at least allegedly instructed, the Israelites to do. And my take on that is our society is so different. We only had speed limit laws not that long ago because of motor vehicles. The ancient world of the Israelites was so different and quite literally foreign to us that those ethical imperatives met the practical day-to-day purposes that they dealt with. No jails, no germ theory. How do you build a society in an agrarian, in some ways nomadic society, tribalistic society? How do you build an ethical framework? And we just think we know better. And I just think, no, we don't. We don't know better. We wouldn't do better than them in those circumstances.
Right. If you take us back, the smartest and most moral among us, and put us back 2,000 years ago, we would die overnight.
Maybe not quite overnight, but yes, right. Yeah.
Pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I actually think that works more towards my view, though. I just think that each culture develops their own ethical framework, and then you're born into it, and it goes into your well, and that becomes absolutely the truth. And you're not only following what's in the well, you're watching your neighbor, and you're like, hey man, you did not face your oxen to the northwest. I made that up, but I mean, you didn't do the things that are in the rule book, so you're wrong.
Yeah, but how does that explain moral progress, though? If we're just born into our cultural context, why should we be supporters of what we think is moral progress?
Well, I think we're going to be supporters just because we're human beings. So even if we were morally regressing, the people who are pushing for moral regress would still be passionate about it.
Right.
So I think we're all going to be passionate, but then the ones who actually are doing things that are like measurably better later, it might be 300 years later before historians are like, okay, these guys actually did pretty well. And then those other guys who are pushing for weird things, they're not here anymore.
Right. Think slavery or civil rights. How about women's rights?
Right.
Those took a very long time to develop.
Yes.
And today we all think these are good things, but yet it took a very long time, centuries upon centuries to develop.
Right.
But so my question is, why should we think that we can just trust only ourselves and think within ourselves to make, why wouldn't we be the slave owner or the racist or the misogynist? Why wouldn't we be those persons in the societies?
Yeah, and this goes back to my my part where I learned to be the way I was through trial and error. When I was a teenager in high school, I was very selfish. So, I was selfish as a kid, but, even as a teenager in high school, I probably should have known better. Like my two daughters are in high school now, and they're much more considerate of other people than I was at their age. So I have a hard time like fussing at them for grades when they're
maybe they get that from their mother.
Yeah, absolutely. They take after their mother in more ways than one. Certainly with their looks, thank goodness. But I think trial and error, and you learn maybe the makes you do it. But now when I think of what am I going to do, I think what is that other person thinking? What are they going through? Like I would say, what am I now? 53. Maybe for 30 years now, if I was out jogging and I saw like a young lady ahead of me, I would go the other way just because I'm like, just the idea of me passing her from the behind might make her nervous, especially at night. So I'll just go another way. So I'm thinking, I'm putting myself in that other person's view and thinking, why scare somebody when I'm just jogging? But that probably took some time. I probably, before that in high school, maybe I saw a pretty person who walked up and said, "Hey, what's up?" And she's like, "Hold on, I don't know you. Why are you just walking up?" And over time, I realized, like, okay, wait a minute, I see that now. I was thinking I wanted to talk to a pretty person. They're trying to get through their lives, and they don't want everyone walking up to them. It took time to kind of put yourself in the mind of other people. Maybe just because the world makes you do that. It would be nice if God did that, but if God does do that, He seems to do it in a way that we learn it through trial and error.
So in this learning process, you've discovered what might say is the golden rule, right? That we should be treating others the way we would want to be treated.
Yes, but isn't that pragmatic? Does it have to be the mandate, or can it just be, if we're not that way, we're not going to make it? So we had to be the kind of people who are that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we might survive along the silver rule, which is don't do to others what you don't want done to you. But the golden rule is to do to others, right? It requires going beyond yourself, giving to those who are in need. It's proactive. So maybe we could survive with the silver rule only.
Maybe. Another thing that I picked up from all these books is that it wasn't just self-interest that we developed biologically. It was self-interest and cooperation, and then zealotry. And zealotry is where I say the terrorism stuff happens, but it's also the meaning and purpose comes from the zealotry too. So like when I feel competing thoughts inside of me, I don't think of it as like good versus evil. I think of it as self-interest versus cooperation versus zealotry. And I'm like, is this something that I'm really idealistic about and that's pushing me? Or is this something where I just feel like it would be nice to help somebody? Or do I just want this? For me, I feel those three forces kind of, and I think it's human nature to have those three at war, not where one wins, but that they're at war, because there might be times when you need to drop everything and take care of yourself. And then there might be times where you just help somebody just to help them. And then there might be times where your moral framework is really your guidepost and you stick with it. So I think all three of those are fighting sometimes and two are working together sometimes, but that competition and that contentiousness, I think, is something that we're all born with. Maybe not psychopaths. I've read that psychopaths don't have that moral framework guidepost, but I think that's where it comes from, and I think just maybe we had to evolve to have those three frameworks inside of us to make it programmable, so that we could become warriors if we need to be at a moment's notice, or we could become loving neighbors in a community of diverse people under those circumstances. So yeah, I see it as pragmatic rather than a mandate.
Let me go back to the screenshot here of your Facebook post, and I don't think we're going to be able to get through all these.
Okay.
But we've gone down the first route, remember, and I said I sort of had two lines I wanted to take. So yes. There's a few things you say here about being born, that people who are born into a certain environment are just unlucky, right? Let's say they're born into a culture, they never hear the gospel.
Right.
Are they going to be condemned to hell? So, I mean, let me ask, are you aware of, there's a debate in Christian circles about the problem of the unevangelized, and there's a camp that I identify with, which is called inclusivism, and it's roughly the idea that God is going to judge each according to the information and the knowledge that they do have. So for those that haven't heard of the gospel, God uses or will use this relativistic standard for people who don't have the type of information that you're describing in your post. Are you familiar with that discussion?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the discussion, and I think that's good. In fact, I want to ask you about that. I want to kick the tires on that in a second. But first, to answer your question, I like that idea. I like that people are just they're aware that other people haven't heard the word, that they're going to be judged differently. I like that. I think it's too simplistic to think you've got to repeat these words back. There's a message for the world, and if you can articulate it back at the end of your life, you're going to be in good standing. And if you can't, you're not. I think some people still believe that.
I dealt with that last week with orthodoxy and orthopraxy, right?
Yeah. Real quick, because I know you know Mike Licona, so then I know you know Nabil Qureshi, even though we haven't talked about Nabil Qureshi. If Nabil Qureshi had a twin brother, you know that both of them were taught by their parents that they can't, not to watch out for Christians, but that they can't embrace Christianity because it's going to screw everything up, because then they'll see Jesus as part of the Trinity rather than a prophet. And they're like, they raised them as kids to not embrace Christianity. So Nabil happened to meet David Wood, and I don't think if he hadn't met David Wood and Mike Licona, I think he would have passed away as a Muslim, but he did. So what if his twin brother didn't? I just gave him a twin brother. Do you think, even though, let's say they both met David Wood and they both met Mike Licona, but the twin brother was like, nah, man, I'm going to stick with what my parents said, will they still be judged by God differently? Will God say, okay, you both met him, but one of you got really taken by that and the other one didn't? Do you think they're going to get equal, not equal treatment, but equal consideration?
Yeah. So, assuming there are certain assumptions here, right? Assuming basically the same formula, right? That they received the same information with the same tone, with the same loving approach, and just came to different conclusions. Yeah, this is, the scriptures talk about those who reject the gospel message, and God will judge people accordingly. Now, I think a lot hinges on whether that was a genuine reception of the gospel, the hearing reception. It may not have been accepted. But, I did this little 15-minute interview with Jim Bilby. He's written a book on postmortem opportunity. And so he doesn't call it second opportunity, but first opportunity for people who didn't get a genuine first opportunity. And now, maybe Jim's view's different from my own, but this very well could just be the day of judgment is sort of that first opportunity, possibly for some people. I don't see how, let's suppose the day of judgment is here, here are your sins. How do you plead? And, if people don't want to admit that they're guilty, because of their wrongdoings, then that's so. But I don't know how it all works. Of course, we only know just a little bit, and but so yes, what's being proposed here though is that if God does use this relativistic standard, that would be certainly in our limited, finite minds a fairer approach. Obviously, God is a just judge, so I would argue by definition he'll be just. I know that others won't buy that, but it seems like, getting back to your poster, it seems like that approach would quell the concern, right?
Right. If it turns out that that's what happens, and that for me, one thing I study in my neurology is that if you're taught that if you're taught that embracing Jesus is evil, which a lot of Muslim kids are, and they're raised that way, if you accept Jesus as God, that's evil and that's an affront to God, you're going to have a hard time converting those guys to Christianity. It happens. It does happen. And some Muslims don't do that. Some Muslims say, hey, we're all one. It's all an illusion. Just love people. There's millions of Muslims like that. But some Muslims are very strict, and they're like, if you do this one thing, you're going to be really, really in trouble. And Jesus himself was going to be one of the first people to punish you in your afterlife. Those people are probably not going to become Christians. And that's just statistically sad. And I hope that God would say, okay, you were actually raised to think this was evil, so I can understand why you rejected it.
Okay, we're running low on time. We'll just do one more screenshot here before we close up. It's the one you posted this morning. And I said, screenshotted for afternoon convo. So here it is. You wrote, when a Christian says I'm a degenerate because I haven't surrendered to Christ, I don't get mad. My take is I do bad things sometimes because I'm a human being. It's like when Christians keep calling themselves and everyone else sinners. The same thing is going on here. They recognize there's something weird about us that applies to everybody, no matter what. All of which leads me to this. If I suddenly saw the light right now, fell to my knees, accepted Jesus in my heart, fully realized he was the only possible source for redemption and spending eternity with my Creator, and I spent the rest of my life genuinely struggling to honor God with all my heart and soul, I'd still be a degenerate. Okay, so I'm not a Calvinist. I know that at least for some Calvinists, humans are totally depraved even after accepting the gospel message, and somehow I don't understand that view, because the Holy Spirit comes in your life, you bear fruit of the Spirit, and your life's changed. Christian theologians talk about the process of sanctification, that's becoming more like Christ. So you'd say you'd still be a degenerate. I don't think you would be. Let's fight it out. So if you accepted Jesus and you took up your cross daily, you followed Jesus, tell me, why would you still be a degenerate?
I think even if in that mindset where I'm dedicated and really, really trying, I'm still going to fall short. There's going to be times where I'm mad. There's going to be circumstances where I freak out. There's going to be times where I'm bored. I've noticed in my life that some people mess up when they're really under trying times, and some people mess up when they're bored. So there's so many different examples. So, like I try to behave just because I realize, like I said before, that's trial and error. Is God telling me to behave, or is my social self arguing against my selfish self? And so the social self wins more often just through practice, which is what I think happens. But I still fall short. And all the Christians that I know, even great ones, I've got a neighbor who's just really, really strict and really, really a great loving man, and he still messes up. I've watched him mess up, and sometimes maybe even worse, because he's so sure of himself that I think sometimes he takes steps that might cause more damage than he realizes.
Hopefully he's not watching the stream here.
well, some of that comes from him. Some of him's like, man, I really made some mistakes there. But what I'm saying is that no matter what, even trying, you're going to fall short, just because I think we're struggling. We have that selfish cooperation and zealotry fighting. You're going to fall apart. And again, I'm thinking it's because we're products of evolution, rather than having a creator who made us and we're in his image. We're walking contradictions, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't. So I think we're going to fall short even if we struggle. So I was trying to take that theology of, if you become a Christian, and lately online, if some people have been following my page, there's another Christian who's very fierce, who's just said, you're evil because you're an atheist. And that's how I know you're bad. It doesn't matter if you save the world. It was Satan that saved the world, and he's using you to trick me, and I'm not going to fall for it. So I've been kind of nudging that guy.
So you're saying with this word degenerate here, you're not meaning something like always sinning, but you're just saying that
we fall short.
Yeah, you fall short. I mean, a Christian term.
We fall short, and then we also probably even worse than we expect. Sometimes I think everybody goes through this. You're like, oh my gosh, am I that guy?
Yeah.
And again, I just think that's part of trial and error. I don't think that means you're evil. I just think if you're strong enough to kind of look back and be devastated at something you did in the past, that's probably a good thing. And I'm just saying, so I think in that respect, we all do that, which makes me think when a Christian's telling me I'm a degenerate, I'm like, you're just telling me that, that I do some awful things sometimes, but I don't think being a Christian is going to stop me from that.
Yeah. Richard, I'll say something provocative here.
Okay.
I think you are close to the kingdom.
Right. Woo! I'm going to come to you on Judgment Day. I'm going to be like, hold that thought. Let me get my friend Kurt over here. He's going to be my attorney.
I mean, seriously, you've understood here human sinfulness, and falling short. And, I mean, in a sense, when these Christians come to you and say you're evil, you're basically saying, yeah, you're right. I mean, but it's, you are too. We all are. Right. And it's what we do with that. But in this sense, you've understood humility. Now,
I try.
But so yeah, at the end of the day, I would say I think you should give further thought about what gives ground to the moral framework. I think there is an objectivity out there beyond the human experience. So I'd love for you to come over even one step at a time over to the Christian position, and maybe that's through becoming a self-identified deist to start. There's a something out there.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
So if there's a something out there, then you're no longer an atheist.
Right. Yeah. That, we could maybe even do a show about whether going from atheism to deism is actually towards Christianity or not, because I would say a lot of Christians are becoming deconstructed into more of a deists. So I don't know that deism necessarily leads to Christianity. It could, but then I think a lot of Christians are becoming. There's a lot of Christians who believe that they say there's got to be something, but I don't know what it is, and I'm still going to say Christian because I'm in a Christian culture. I mean, now Richard Dawkins is saying he's a Christian cultural Christian, so I don't know that deism is a step in that direction, but we can argue about that another show.
Well, you've got to believe in a God in order to believe that the Christian God is true, and if you don't think there's even a God, then you're not going to believe in Christianity. So, I mean, that's
right.
That's going to impact the thought process. So that's why I would say, you would have to think that a God exists before becoming a Christian.
I can see that. I can see that approach.
Yeah. But you're right. There are a lot of folks who are deconstructing and leaving the Christian faith. My observation on that, and I'll finish up with this, my observation on that is it's a lot of Reform people. It's a lot of people who come from a Calvinist framework. And, I've got Calvinist ministry partners. I have good conversations with Calvinist brethren. I think if you were to perform an objective survey of these people deconstructing, what I'll say is a disproportional amount of deconstruction, people who have deconverted are Reformed. Now, when I say disproportional, Calvinists make up just a fraction of Christendom. I mean, they're really vocal online. They love theology. But when you survey the whole of Christendom, they are a fraction. But of the deconstructionists, I would say it's a large minority or even a majority, perhaps. That's my hypothesis. I'd love for someone to do the formal research on this, but that's given what I've seen online, working in this field of work, and just having an interest in it, I think that's my take on it. So, and what does that say then about the Calvinist conception of God with looking at justice and love, and how does all that jive? So there's tension there for sure.
I would imagine Tim Stratton and Josh Klein have done some research on that. So if you're looking for a guest to talk about it, they probably have the academic chops to tackle it.
Good. Richard, this has been so good. We still have screenshots to go. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Richard will be on next week for our roundtable discussion, which we're calling Oval Table Discussions. You'll find out why next week, why they're called Oval Table Discussions. And Richard will be back, the Faithiest Atheist. Maybe he'll have a different name by next week. That would be evidence of a miracle maybe.
It would be, absolutely.
And we'll also be joined by some others, assuming that they're still good to go. The Potential Theist, Jordan, Potential Theist. And then we also have Chris Lilly, who's in the Episcopal Church. So I'm sort of the conservative. I'm the evangelical conservative on that roundtable. So it'll be an interesting discussion looking at faith, skepticism, and doubt, and the role that doubt plays. So we'll have an interesting conversation with the four of us. I'm looking forward to it. Richard, thanks so much. I'm going to close up the show here, but stick on in a few moments, and I'll chat with you a little more.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, before I close out, let me say, if you would like to leave a message at Veracity Hill, you can give us a call. We actually have a phone line. The number is 5052-STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. And yes, it's the same number we had so many years ago when we did our first season, we'll call it, 4 years of the Veracity Hill podcast. And now that we're back, we're continuing to take messages. You can leave me a message. So if you'd like to have your voice heard, you don't have to say your name, but I enjoy learning people's names. So reach out, use the phone line, and we'd be happy to play your question or your comment on the program. Be sure to give a review for Veracity Hill on whatever podcast app you're listening to. It's a great way for other people to get a quick, experience description of what you've enjoyed about the show, and would love your feedback as well. So we've looked at the topic of skepticism. We've looked at morality. We've talked about all sorts of subjects today with my friend Richard, and it's just a joy to talk to him. I appreciate his temperament and his approach, and I want to thank him for coming on our show today, and I look forward to more discussion next week as well. So that does it for the show today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks who just chip in a few bucks each month to help the program sustainable here at Veracity Hill, our ministry work. Thank you for those that are supporting this work. If you've enjoyed it, I want to encourage you to become one of the monthly partners today. You can go to veracityhill.com/donate. I also want to thank the partnerships that we have with our sponsors, Defenders Media, Apologetics315.com, and Rethinking Hell. Thank you to our tech team, Gabe, to Mark for whipping up that video on ChatGPT and a Skeptic. And I want to thank our guest today, the Faithiest Atheist, the freest deist, Richard. We'll see him again next week. And last but not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on What is a Skeptic?
This has been Veracity Hill, a viewer and listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.